Well, hello. It's the 162nd episode of the Brian Hornback Experience here in the Old Forge Distilling Podcast Studio. That's right, the Old Forge Distilling Podcast Studio. I'm glad to have my friends at Old Forge Distilling up in Pigeon Forge. Now not only as an advertiser on brianhornback.com, but now as the podcast studio sponsor. So those of you that drink and drink responsibly, when you go to the liquor store, look for Old Forge. Whiskey, moonshine. Eventually we'll have some bottles back here to have on display. Right back there is the infamous Kaz Walker taking a shot at another council member at a city council meeting one night. Sorry about that. There it is. Well, my Ring camera's getting in the middle of it, but there's Mr. Walker right there. And there's the man that got the good right hook from Mr. Walker. And of course, Mayor then, and also Mayor then at that time, Duncan, who then would become our congressman. And of course, his son was our congressman for a number of years. And a council member, I guess, is dodging the blows. But as you know, also, when you're talking about Kaz Walker, you got to remember the shears. You got to save where you get the Kaz Walker shears. And of course, Mr. Walker passed away in the 90s, but I'm sporting the Kaz Walker for President t-shirt. So if we could run him for president, we would, right? Anyway, my good friend Ronnie Collins, I think I've talked about Ronnie on here before. Ronnie goes to a lot of estate sales, and he knows that I collect a lot of political stuff. Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. The older, the better. I mean, whatever he can find, he brings to me. And so today we had the local lore. We had the third of the local lore 2024. Today was at Chihowie Park. There's going to be 5 YouTube videos that go up later today on brianhornback.com to talk about Chihowie Park. Mr. Beeman is the one that started Chihowie Park. It's gone through a lot of different eras, to use the term of Taylor Swift. But there was a Kaz Walker. One reason I'm wearing a Kaz Walker shirt is, and I have the Kaz Walker coon hunter hat around here somewhere. The reason I was wearing that was that Jennifer Montgomery of Wallace Real Estate, who, by the way, is now on brianhornback.com, had told me last week that there would be some Kaz Walker things to go with the tour. And so, come to find out, the horse barns were Kaz Walker's horse barns. The Jacobs building had burnt at one time apparently and was rebuilt. The horse barns were burnt and they were rebuilt, but they were the Kaz Walker horse barns. So that was the significance of Kaz Walker in relation to Chihowie Park in the history of the Chihowie Park. But back to my friend Ronnie Collins. Ronnie Collins is a guy that if you come to the Motley Crue Community Luncheon, which will be this coming Friday, May the 10th, at the Crown Plaza, starts about 11:30, should be out by 1. Ronnie is the official photographer for the Motley Crue. He's also the official photographer for the local lore. He's been doing that for a number of years. I'm new to local lore this year. Primarily my role is to do kind of the video, doing the video, posting it up to YouTube. And now that I'm doing this podcast, I'm realizing that I really need to get to the barber. Anyway, so Ronnie brought me some stuff today that is really kind of cool. I'm going to start with the next to the oldest. These are some emery boards. You know, women used to clean their, before there were nail salons on every corner in Knoxville, where you could go get your nails done, ladies. Politicians used to hand these out. I've got a bunch of these from a lot of different people over the years. This one is from a guy named Durwood O. Sharp, Register of Deeds. It just says, vote for Durwood O. Sharp. The reason I have two of them is to show you that they were different. I mean, same color, right? But they just, you know, anyway. So Durwood O. Sharp, Register of Deeds, was the Knox County Register of Deeds from 1966 until 1980. The year I was born, 1966. The year I became a freshman in high school, 1980. I got involved in politics. My first campaign was in 1982 when I was a sophomore at Carter High School. I got involved in the Robin Beard for U.S. Senate campaign. He was a Republican. He was a congressman, but he ran against Jim Sasser, the Democrat Jim Sasser. He was Sasser's first opponent after Sasser had been elected 82, sometime in the mid-70s, I guess. And so that is Mr. Sharp. What I think, so the second one I want to show you is Wanda Teague for Circuit Court Clerk. Again, similar to the Durwood Sharp ones, just the colors are kind of swapped. Wanda Teague, don't know that I ever met Miss Teague. I did know her son rather well. Her son was County Commissioner Ralph Teague. She was the circuit court clerk before Lillian Bean. And the reason that Miss Teague stepped down as circuit court clerk in 1979 when Lillian Bean was then picked by the county court, which we now call the county commission, or there was the precursor to the county commission, is that Miss Teague went to work for Lamar Alexander in Nashville. And so her son Ralph then ended up being a county commissioner at some point in the 80s from the Carnes area. And Ralph was a great guy. Ralph has since passed. Ralph was a good friend, a great man. And so I'm sure he got that because of his mother, Wanda Teague. The other one I don't have a date for this yet, but it's from W.W. Bill Luttrell, County Court Clerk. It says re-elect, and so I'm assuming that he had been elected at one point, County Court Clerk, Bill Luttrell. Sorry about that. Did I say Russell? Hopefully I said Luttrell. So those are the three main emery boards I got. Let's go ahead and talk about the pictures Ronnie sent me. So Ronnie also found a bunch of pictures. And so this could be bipartisan. One is a letter to a lady from January 11th of 1999. She was a Knox Countyan, thanking her for helping make the White House winter wonderland for the 98 holiday season. And it's a letter signed by Hillary Rodham Clinton. And they sent her the 1988 Winter Wonderland book that they gave, I guess, to people who came to visit the White House during the 1998 holiday season. So I got that. It's very nice. Talks about the different rooms and how they decorate each room. So that's cool. To go along with that theme, we also have a photograph of Bill and Hillary in front of one of the Christmas trees. We have quite a few of these. We have photographs from Bill, George Herbert Walker Bush and Laura Bush. Another one. We'll save this one for a little bit. Again, Laura and George. George Walker Bush. Herbert Walker was George's dad. Another one of George and Laura. 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 And finally, one of just George. And not to go on a totally presidential, political only thing here, but we also got one from Charlton Heston. Pretty impressive, isn't it? That's from Charlton Heston, the National Rifle Association of America. So these folks clearly were patriots before we knew what patriots were, sending money to not only Republicans, but apparently at one time to Democrats. Thank you. I did not lose. So, still talking about the CAS thing here. I got one. There was only one of these. Vote for Odell Kaz Lane for direct senator for Knox County. See that? Pretty cool, ain't it? So I went and looked, and Odell Kaz Lane was definitely in the 82nd General Assembly. He's a Republican. On the first day of session for the 82nd General Assembly, that was Monday, January the 7th, 1957. There was three representatives from Knoxville: Ralph K. Adcock, Walter Aiken, and Odell Kaz Lane. The Flortella rep from Knox and Loudon was a gentleman by the name of Doyle King. Now, my friend Don Ferguson, who was for a number of years, he was a newspaper reporter back in the day, but he also was the executive director of the U.S. District Court Historical Society, but he worked in the federal court, U.S. District Court. So I'm going to read an article that he's published. You can find this at connections.tned.uscourts.gov. It's Connections Eastern District of Tennessee Outreach. And so the story I'm going to read to you is the Kaz Walker income tax evasion trial. Again, this is written from Don K. Ferguson, and he was in fact present during this trial. And it's not going to take very long for me to read this, so bear with us. The courtroom in the historic U.S. Post Office and the courthouse on Main Street in Knoxville, it's now the Tennessee Supreme Court building, it's the marble one, was the site of many major trials in its 64-year history of serving as the U.S. District Court. One of the most notable trials was that of millionaire supermarket owner and controversial Knoxville politician Kaz Walker in 1961. He was widely known and was said by some to have been in the local news more than any other individual in the past century. In addition to his business, he also had a local television show on which he advertised his groceries and hosted local country musicians. It was on his show that superstar Dolly Parton got her start. Now, the approximately 125 seats in the courtroom were filled every day of the 3-week trial. Some came because they wanted to see one of Knoxville's most famous lawyers in action, the legendary Ray Jenkins. One of my attorney advertisers on the Brian Hornback.com is Burks and Ogle. Chuck Burke had experiences with Ray Jenkins. And he told me that off camera. And at some point, I need to get Mr. Burks to come on and let's talk about Ray Jenkins. But anyway, Jenkins and another prominent Knoxville lawyer, Clyde Key, along with his associate McAfee Lee, represented Walker. Some said Key's role was to try the case and that Jenkins' role was to appeal to the jury. That's one of the things I've heard about Ray Jenkins, was his appeal to the jury. Another person that I know appealed to the jury was the late Zane Daniel. But again, they were effective. Walker was acquitted, as was his co-defendant, Miss Pearl Brock, the company's office manager. The defendants and the lawyers are all now deceased. One morning before court convened on a day near the end of the trial, the jury was heard singing "The Old Rugged Cross" in the jury room. Several of the jurors were known to be singers, and one had brought his guitar. Don Ferguson, this is Don, he says, I was a News Sentinel reporter at the time and interviewed a juror immediately after the trial. He said the jury felt that something strange was going on in Walker's operations, but that the government failed to prove any wrongdoing. Walker was known to talk at great length in all of his activities, often not staying on point. Despite the efforts of his lawyers and U.S. District Judge Robert L. Taylor to keep Walker's testimony on track, his answers often went far beyond the scope of the questions asked him. Sometimes even rambled on into little speeches. But it was his talking during a recess that nearly got him in trouble with the judge. During a break, Walker strolled into a witness room and started talking to witnesses, which is disallowed by court rules. Upon learning of the incident, Judge Taylor called the attorneys to the bench and told them in a hushed but stern voice, if he doesn't stop, I'm going to take action. I expect you to see that it's stopped. On his television show one evening during the course of the trial, when Walker started talking about what went on at the trial that day, the audio on the show was cut off the air for about 2 minutes. You could see him, but you couldn't hear him. WATE said at the time that Walker's airtime had been purchased only for the purpose of selling groceries and to offer entertainment by country musicians. In the case against Walker, the government charged that as part of the alleged tax fraud scheme, the supermarket chain regularly issued checks made out to various produce firms, and that an official of the grocery chain would then forge the firms' names on the back as endorsements, take from the daily proceeds a sum equal to the total, and use the money in the chain's produce operations. The government said this mysterious process was Kaz Walker Cash Store's method of replenishing its produce fund. Why were these phony checks made out? A government prosecutor asked Odell Kaz Lane, Walker's nephew, who handled the grocery chain's produce operations. Lane, a member of the Tennessee legislature at the time, replied, those checks aren't phony, just the names on them is, but that's all. A few weeks later, after the trial ended, one of the jurors, and reportedly a second one, were hired as clerks in one of Walker's supermarkets. The grocery chain ceased operating in the mid-1980s. Now again, thank you to Don Ferguson for that. Thank you. I'm reading it from that website. I'll put a link to that page on the brianhornback.com post that has this podcast on it. But let me just tell you, that right there is going with all the legendary Kaz Walker stuff. I'm just going to tell you, Ronnie Collins is a guy that I've only met in about the last 2 or 3 years, as long as we've been doing the Motley Crue. But that dude right there has become hero in my book, because not only is he going around and getting me good political paraphernalia that I can add to my collection. But he got me something that had connection to the Kaz Walker family. So that's pretty doggone good. And Ronnie Collins, at some point, I'll have to try to repay you. And I haven't quite figured that out yet. But anyway, just wanted to take, it's been a while since I've been on. I was under the weather for a couple of weeks. Had a medical procedure last week. Everything's great, perfect, fine. And so I've been away, but I'll be back. And, you know, it's just a great opportunity anytime that I can talk about the great Kaz Walker, a guy who sold groceries. And I sold groceries 35 years as a salesman to grocery stores, convenience stores, big box stores like Walmart, Target, those folks. He was a politician. I guess I'm a politician. I've been elected to the school board. I've been elected to become the Knox County Republican Party chairman. I'm on the Tennessee Republican Party State Executive Committee. But when my friend Dewey Faust, back many years ago, my mother and father were overheard Dewey say it when he referred to someone and was talking about BrianHornback.com. Kaz had a newspaper called The Watchdog. I've got copies of The Watchdog here that I've purchased over the years. But Dewey Faust is the first person to ever call me Kaz Jr. And I take that as a badge of honor. I accept the term Kaz Jr. And anything I can do to continue carrying on the legacy of Kaz Walker in some minimal form, I'm happy to do it. Now, exactly what happened to cause that fight, I don't know. I'm not going to start a fight, but I ain't going to walk away from one either. Anyway, the great Kaz Walker, former Knoxville mayor, former grocery store operator, former entertainer with his show, the Kaz Walker Farm and Home Hour, which I remember as a kid before going to school, watching the Kaz Walker Farm and Home Hour. I remember my grandmother, my mama, taking me to the Kaz Walker store on Magnolia at Cherry Street, building still there. And I remember the Kaz Walker stores, but he's what's made Knoxville great. So all these people that are moving in here because they heard about Kaz Walker and what a great community servant he was. And who knows, maybe putting fluoride in water was the right thing. He did that. But he always fought to keep the politicians honest. You know, every business in Knoxville has had some form of issues. I mean, even the pilot Flying J's have had issues in court, right? So Kaz was just, he was a man of his time. Today, during local lore, I heard about where he kept his coon dogs. And so, might have to go visit there one day. Anyway, it's been a long episode, 162. Again, thank you to Old Forge Distilling for having us in this Old Forge Distilling podcast studio. Thanks to Burks and Ogle. I really do want to try to get Chuck Burks on to talk about Ray Jenkins. And to Jennifer Montgomery, realtor at Wallace Real Estate in Bearden, and the historian hostess with the mostest, who does local lore. Local lore will be this coming Sunday, Mother's Day, 6 p.m. in Inskip. We're going to meet at Inskip School. So I encourage you to come learn all about Inskip. and takes less than an hour, and it's just good Knoxville history, little pieces of it. So anyway, y'all stay tuned.